back in the day, I made a MAM that people know me for called Cat TV. Made the head Cat TV. And we did a lot of work with XML and bringing things in, what have you. But there's a sort of theme to what I do now. And Brian, who runs this show, is from Soho Editors. Back in the day, we did the first Apple XAN in Europe for ITV London, and Brian did the training. But it was the massive size of 248 terabytes. And my job was to bring 100-odd people who were doing trailers, essentially, into the Apple world, into Final Cut, take them off Avid, teach them stuff. So the first theme is I was dealing with 100 people. And you learn, it's a different problem. We had to figure out how to work on a SAN with 100 people. Then I sort of went to NASCAR, and I had the same, and we put in a brand new Apple facility in Charlotte, $138 million of stuff. And they had another 200 people working on Final Cut. And I had to devise ways of making it all work. So along the way, I made a roadmap, which we now call MAM. I didn't even call it MAM at the time. I didn't know what it was. I thought, I'm a film guy. I thought we need something to log in, right? So Cat TV was very successful, and we did well with it. But all along the line, I kept talking to people who essentially didn't want to work in a MAM. Because MAM, I'm sorry, my friends, MAM was getting in the way. You know, who wants to log? When they showed me the alpha of Final Cut X, and Luke was showing me that they had done away with bins, and they'd just gone for tagging and keywords, and no negotiation on this, you got to do it, well, we all know the world ended. But I'd been doing it for many years in Cat TV, tagging, so I knew there was a lot of resistance to it. So what I was then given the task of he's on my booth at the minute, of doing something called, in 2011 for the BBC, called the Olympics. It was the smallest game in town, and the BBC being the BBC, they moved everything from London and built a brand new site, and they gave me hundreds of freelancers. And it's the fastest moving thing in the world, and they said, Chris gave me a document, it was about 60 pages long, and he said, these are the rules, this is what we're going to do. And we're going to have hundreds of freelancers, and we're going to give them 5 minutes training, and it's all going to be marvelous. Well, what have you got? The first thing I said to myself was, well, Cat TV won't work because it's moving too fast. Because we either centralize ingest or we essentially, which is what we did, because putting data in the right place, because that's effectively what it was considered to be so hard and so serious. If it went wrong, we wouldn't find anything, we wouldn't go to where. We gave specialized people the job of doing it. So what I'm doing now is I'm logging into a database in Liverpool where I've got some servers, and I've got Focalpoint running. Now, Focalpoint is almost the anti-MAM, right? I asked myself all the questions that in Cat TV and other MAMs we do. We give ourselves hundreds of fields, thousands of keywords, and we argue about what keywords could go in there because they're specialized and we can't find anything. So for the Olympics, I said, what could we do that would be different? And so this is our server. I need to know who I am and log in. And this is the whole interface that has been running in BBC Sports in Manchester for 6 years. We went in live, and I wrote it very thing. And it's a different take on things. I'll get on to how it relates to Final Cut in a minute. But what is the fewest number of tags we need to find things? Essentially, I can train you how to use this and put it in a couple of seconds. Really, it goes, I want you to create an object. I want you to read your badge and tell me what department you're working for, right? This is the metadata we're trying to put in, and we can just go, is it football, fencing, whatever? Is it a feature? And then the hardest bit, and the most important tag in production workflow, what's the name of the show? So we could go something like the Soho Editors Show. Then we take all this metadata and we concatenate it. We tokenize it. And I'm going to use these tokens, this little bit, small bits of information, to create structure and organization and the ability to find everything. You're almost trained. So then we go create, and stuff happens. Now, every machine on the network is running Focalpoint. So any changes I make are broadcast around the system. Now, fundamentally, on a SAN, and what people in MAM world, myself, never fail to mention is the only way it ever actually works is to make a folder, give it a name, and put your stuff in there. Anyone do that? Yeah, it's the basics. But we don't think it's too... why don't we go one better? Why don't we make a folder, give it a name, give ourselves lots of places? This is totally over the top. And it's really just for the audience to say, look, I've got some stuff, where do I put it? Okay? The most important one is the sort of media one, I think. Now, if we're a cloud-based system, we're logged into a database and what have you. So we cannot fundamentally, if we're going to go across multiple sites, have one single point of ingest. But what we can do is make sure that if stuff is simply, if we have media like this, and this is a common workflow, we have a drive, we bring stuff in, we take some files, and really, we want them to go to the right place. I've checked in the media into the database. I've made an association with the show and the media. Yeah? Now, most MAM workflows go like this. You make a folder, you give it a name, you bring in your media. You take it out of that into the MAM, you make a catalog, which you give a name, you do some typing, add some metadata, and take it into the NLE. A lot of steps. But what we wanted to do was basically get on with the job. So we can use these types of tools, because this is why we employ the people, not to drive the MAM, right? Now, this form was because in the Olympics, we had to bring in the guys from radio, the web guys, the on-air guys, and all these disparate groups of people. Most of them all shared a different type of culture. Radio guys didn't speak the same language as anyone else, but they wanted the Klopp interview, you know? So we wanted to repurpose, and we have something in England we call cut and paste. And this is a really good way of stealing other people's work. So in a MAM, you have this concept of a catalog, which is the name of the show typically, and your media. What I'm doing is very different. What I'm saying is a catalog is a named object that has pointers to media. But a project file, or a library in Final Cut's case, is a not named object. It's the name of the show. So we go, okay, Soho, right? And then what we do is we create a name, create all your events, give it a nice sensible name, audio, graphics, and this is the object we share. So instead of making a catalog and putting everything in the MAM, what we're using is we're making a catalogs or database full of project files. Now, a project file, as we know, is a named object. It has pointers to media, but it has a superpower. It makes your show, right? A MAM can't, if we have the media and the MAM knows where the media is, you can't make your show. We need the project files and the media, and we can make the show. And this is what we're sharing across the internet. So if you do things like you replicate data from one machine to another or from one site to another, and you preserve the file path to the media, you click on the project and you're there. Now, one of the core features of Final Cut 10, as has probably been shown, is the fact we do all our tagging in there. It's very, very fast. Now, some of the things we did in the BBC is, for some shows, we have lots of rules. I can show you the back end, but the rules are this is an SD show, this is a HD show. When we launch, the engine behind it creates the timeline, sets your cache files, all your renders are going to go to the right places. It's bringing all the freelance guys who never knew how to do the job in the first place. All that's good, because if you're in a fast-moving place, the renders are very important to get out through the door. If you go back to Focalpoint, we can create things like Photoshop, and all of the projects are asked through here. So we could go Soho graphics. And it will do the same thing. So we can go something like fancy graphics. Save that, whatever. And we can drag and drop that, again, anywhere on the network, into our graphics folders. We use the project files, we get on with the job quickly. We can put them in the cloud, we can share the data, and we can do it. And that's been running in that sort of manner. But we don't just use Final Cut 10, we use many other things. Another thing we can do, this is another browser. This browser automatically transcodes your media. When we drag and drop it onto Focalpoint, in the background it transcodes it, turning it HTML5. At the moment of ingest, you have streaming proxies that you can put to anybody in the world. If you have these proxies, we can typically play them. And they're not bad at all. We can also, as you do here, favorite them and all that good stuff, and this is remote. And we can add our own keyword collections, just in the way that Final Cut 10, and we can then, in 5 minutes' time, we can choose all these clips, we can go export, XML, give it the name of event, Soho, and we can download all this media, bring it into, where are we there? 5LE. And there's the clips, Soho, and we can, if we want to, we can relink to them. If we've got the path to the files, and they're all online, all with the metadata, does the ranges and all that key thing. So from ingest, and we can do the inverse. In the browser, I can take media, which I've got here. And if it's not already ingested, I can upload it. So I can be on set that if I got Resolve, which is free, I can make RED files from RED. I can upload these proxies up to the internet. You can do a proxy edit on. When your stuff comes back, you just relink and you're off to the races. We're trying to do bi-directional, very simple. We don't need many tags. Any tags we add in Final Cut 10, we can take all the XML out and drag it into Focalpoint, and we've aggregated the metadata from your editing application of choice. You can do this at the end, and if you do it at the end, what we're doing is taking all the metadata the editor has generated, necessarily in Final Cut 10, and that goes into our archive record. So we can use Focalpoint to archive to products like Archiware. We keep the proxies online in the cloud, so we always have a reference of the media that we've archived. We can even select those pieces of media, play them, and send out a restore command. So we made something very, very simple, and if you come over to the booth and have a look at what I have, we've got many more tools built on top of this. Things like scheduling things and the way jobs move through a process and various other things. But in 15 minutes, as I'm amply proving, it's a big topic, very hard to get through. So hopefully a little bit of flavor of what Focalpoint can do. It's trying to just be simple, but get the job done. Thank you.